how do prolonged Israeli inspections at the border crossing impact the timeline and effectiveness of aid delivery into Gaza?
Thanks for having me in Qnews. Absolutely. Despite the great effort exerted by Egypt as transporting and granting 30% of the humanitarian aid to the Palestinians and continuously opening the crossing to Pata, the authorities of the Israeli occupation hindering such aid through the prolonged measurement into the Palestinian territories in order to be diverted to the Kerem Abu Salam border crossing, to be exposed to the process of inspection. So the Israeli authorities hindering the aid of the quantities that are required for elevating the suffering of the Palestinian people suffering from the genocide, in addition to the starvation war that caused the famine in the Palestinian territories. Having given that Egypt is upholding its diplomatic humanitarian roles along with the mediators to mitigate the pains of the Palestinian people and executing diplomatic policies to pressure the occupation forces and the cabinet to cease fire and to reach ending the humanitarian catastrophe suffered by our brothers in Palestine, specifically in the Gaza Strip.
Well, sir, now there are limited operating hours at the Kerem Abu Salam crossing. How does this restrict the volume of humanitarian aid entering into Gaza? How does this affect, I suppose, the lives of Palestinians because of these restrictions?
Absolutely. Firstly, the authorities of occupation forces refraining the entering the vehicles in Friday and Saturdays. In addition, since the failure of what is called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF, that contributed targeting the defenseless civilian Palestinians while seeking the aid. After its failure and regaining the international system, in addition to allow the vehicles coming from Egypt, from Rafah crossing to Kerem Abu Salam, and to prolonged restrictions and the reluctance of entering the several vehicles, this would undermined the needs of the Palestinian people. Upon His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said that Gaza is in need of 600 to 700 load trucks to be entered daily, and Israel reframed this to take place. All this triggered the international condemnation, and in addition that this aren't sufficient for the Palestinian people. In addition, the entering some materials and putting constraints to enter some other materials such as fuel.
Well, so now, obviously, since the onslaught on Gaza, 70 to 80% of Gaza has been destroyed, including the infrastructure. Now, what are the consequences of damage to the infrastructure as well as roads within Gaza on the internal transport and distribution of aid, especially now that also there are restrictions, not just, destruction of the roads?
Absolutely, this is war crimes and a humanitarian catastrophe committed against the Palestinian people. Firstly, the occupation forces bombarded the roads headed to the crossing roads and made the entrance of the vehicle through Kerem Absalom Crescent, and most of the internal roads were bombarded, and they are out of service and aren't paved properly. That take very long time for delivering the vehicles. In addition to they were exposed to the summer strikes. In addition, the full destruction of the infrastructure such as electricity, water, and the water disposal, and targeting the hospitals along with the pro-clinics. In addition, all caregivers or medical crews or even media personnel are systematically targeted with repetitive strikes in order to make sure that they are killed. So such inhumane practices aren't amounted for any solution than spoil any attempts to stop in a very limited size of the massacres against the Palestinians, specifically in the Gaza Strip. It is a systematic destruction of infrastructure by the Israeli occupation forces and a very direct refrain and hindrance of entering the aid after the failure of the GHF, in addition of killing on daily basis the Palestinians. Most of them were women and children, along with those who were seeking humanitarian aid.
Okay, now with the security situation deteriorating inside Gaza and hunger mounting, how does this specifically hinder the distribution of aid, especially to those who are most vulnerable or hard to reach?
Certainly, the occupation forces are doing its relentless effort to minimize the quantities that were entered by the pressure of Egypt, mediators, and the United States. After the massacres were exposed, war of starvation was exposed, the occupation to refrain and hindering the aid, not only by striking the infrastructure and the impaved of internal roads, and the load trucks were exposed by the lootings, either by the families or other groups. So they're making it very much difficult for the Palestinian civilians to gain their rights. The quantities are very minimum. In addition to the prolonged time of entering the aids, along with killing the defenseless civilians of women and children who are very much in dire need of the humanitarian needs. So the whole system is running the world to refrain the humanitarian aid. So despite that Egypt has fully succeeded to enter the humanitarian aid either by diplomatic pressure or along with the international institutions and the pro-nations for the Palestinian rights. Following the starvation war against the Palestinian people.